Hello and welcome to FI for Kids, a podcast about guiding your kids on the path to financial independence and extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Dominic Delacqua. Our guest today is 3 times TEDx speaker, Catherine Sellery. She's the founder of the Conscious Parenting Revolution and for more than 2 decades has been a trusted voice for parents, educators, and leaders seeking to create more connected, respectful, and productive relationships. We're going to talk today about parenting with less conflict in the context of money and financial independence. Welcome, Catherine, and thanks for coming on the show.
I'm so delighted to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, what a great opportunity to talk about all of these important topics to kids be the most successful they can possibly be.
Yeah, good. So let's start with your background and specifically kind of your background about money. So what did you learn about money when you were growing up and how did that shape you in terms of your finances?
So I had like pretty much 2 extremes growing up. So my mom's family, my mom was born in 1909. And so, the whole crash mentality and the Great Depression really affected. She was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and there was a family grocery store. And it was a very sort of, I think, difficult, yet also very connected time. Like there are lots of happy memories and it wasn't hardship in that way, but money was really tight. Yeah. And then my dad, on the other hand, was a trust fund baby. And his grandfathers, each one were heads of industry. So one formed U.S. Gypsum, was one of the founders of the U.S. Gypsum. And so, there's lots of stock, lots of dividends, lots of that happening. And the other was one of the first Ford dealers in North America. And there's a whole family book about my great-grandfather's dispute with Henry Ford when he delivered literally like a train full of cars during the Great Depression. Whether you want them or not, you're going to take them. And it was a big standoff between my grandfather, who said, no, I won't. And I think they sat there and acquired demurrage for about 8 months.
Huh. Wow.
In like Wichita, Kansas or something. So yeah, no, very different perspectives on money and wealth and how available money is. Yeah.
And so what was your experience then growing up? Like, was it something that you talked about much or like just how did that play out for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur and had lots and lots of different businesses and taught us about the businesses, and we were always really interested. And my mother was much more cautious and careful. And, as an adult looking back on their relationship, I would say that she was trying to bring balance and had experiences that he didn't know anything about. And she was trying to create some caution. And he needed that caution, by the way. And so, yeah, I think what it did for me, because professionally, I ended up as a commodities trader for many years. And I guess what I learned was totally informed by those upbringing years about never bet the farm, always take out your profits when you have them. Definitely, don't assume that it's always going to be a particular way.
So that's interesting. So what led you into being a commodities trader?
It just happened.
Okay.
Truncated version. So I was a political science major, history minor, and grew up with like lots of family businesses. So I guess you could say before there were terms like a family office, we had one.
Yeah.
And dad was a wheeler dealer. So that was in my wheelhouse. It was like I'd been bathed in it.
Sure.
I didn't even know that I knew a lot about making deals. I just did.
Yeah.
I had a love affair with China. So I'd studied the language, lived there in the early 80s, taught at a university, and then worked for one of the first international joint venture companies, which happened to have a fiber optic cable contract in China. And I was on the ground in the making of that. And I came back for law school and there were some family tragedies. I ended up leaving at the end of my second year and kind of going through the, what's it all about, Alfie period of my life. And I'd say a couple of years later, I started a business trading old newspaper and old cardboard to the Far East, sourcing it in North America and selling it to the Far East. At the time, and it may still be, it was the number one export in volume from the United States of America.
Interesting.
We
Wow.
export because we don't do anywhere near as much recycling as the Far East.
Yeah.
And maybe
Right.
Europe as well. I'm not sure, but that was my market. And I found a financial backer and I did the deals. And that's what got me into going back and forth to Hong Kong, China again. And then somewhere along the way, somebody, you meet millions of traders. Somebody was like, can you help me get rid of this manganese or some non-ferrous minor metal? I knew nothing about non-ferrous metals, nothing about non-ferrous minor metals, to be even more specific. And so I just made some phone calls when I got back to the States and started calling metals traders. I didn't know anything about the business. And 6 months later, one of those called me and said, we're going to open up an office in Hong Kong. We're looking for a trader who speaks Chinese and we'll teach you the metals business. And I said, okay. So then I moved to Omaha, Nebraska for a summer. And I sat in their scrap metal sorting and recycling plant and learned all about ISRI specifications and minor metals and scrap. And then I got sent over to Hong Kong to open up the Hong Kong office. They were very specifically strong in antimony, which is the number one export from China in terms of minor metals, and antimony specifically. They export more than any country. And I got really good at that. And then just learning about how to buy and sell and trade. So we were commodity traders who bought it, sold it, delivered it. And it's a little different than trading the futures.
So that's all really interesting. It's almost like I'd like to have a whole nother conversation with you just about that.
Yeah.
But maybe what's more fascinating is, so you were in that world, then what brought you to the conscious parenting revolution and this whole emphasis that you have on helping parents have more productive relationships with their kids, with better trust, less conflict, real conversations? I mean, because that's really important work. So how did you get from this commodities world to this completely different focus?
Yeah. So I was hired by this company. I was brought to Hong Kong in 1989 with my husband, who was my trailing spouse. He's an architect and he can work anywhere in the world. Side note, just because it's really interesting, his dad was born in China. His grandfather was a medical missionary.
Oh, wow.
And so his grandparents were in China in the early 20s, which is just interesting because when I got this job, I was like, how do you feel about moving to Hong Kong? He's like, oh my God, I grew up on stories of China.
Yeah.
My dad was born there. My uncle was born there. My grandparents lived there. They set up a hospital. Anyway, so that was just really like karmic. The long story short is I ended up having a factory for 25 years. And that was a slightly different angle because now I was more in manufacturing. It was much less risky, and commodities trading with the countries that I was trading in, it was really risky. So the more money we made, the more money I had to lose. And so when you have no money, it's great to take on really risky trades because what have I got to lose? And what have you got to sue me for? Next to nothing. As that transaction begins to change, so does your temperament for risk, or at least mine did. So then I kind of became more of a manufacturer. And what that meant was it was more like passive income. And that's when we also started having our own kids and family. And I was able to become like mom. And my focus was more on being present as a parent. And that's when I realized how little I knew about how to do that well.
Sure.
Yeah. And that's when it was really just like all things in life, Need drives, right? What is that expression? Need is the mother of invention. Well, it really is.
Right.
So I was really in search of a better way I just needed a way other than just to do that wash and repeat replication of the cycle that happened to me or my spouse. And so we didn't have any knowledge whatsoever about how to handle behavioral disruptions or how to find a way to manage the day-to-day situations that arise and feel like good about our approach.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's so easy to just fall into conflict,
Totally.
right?
Well, conflict happens all day long.
Yeah.
And the question is, how am I going to approach this conflict? What am I going to do about it? Is it going to be rewards and punishments? Is it going to be threats? Is it going to be a power over? Is it going to be using fear? Like, what's my modality?
Hmm.
And I didn't have one. What is it? What's your theory of change? A friend of mine tells me that all the time. Like, what is your theory of change? What do you believe about change? And I was like, oh my God, I don't even know if I have one. But it turns out we all do, whether we're conscious of it or not. We lean into what we believe changes the circumstances that we want changed.
So give me an example of that.
Sure. So let's say you've got a kid who's talking to you in ways that you don't like. And your theory of change may be, well, if you don't stop that, then, you're just going to have your phone taken away and all your privileges. So there's a theory there. The theory would be that I believe that people change their behavior when I do something to them that's unpleasant. And so that would be an external locus of causality, that I can make people change their behavior based on what I do to them.
Right.
So that's authoritarian power over parenting, which activates retaliation, rebellion, and resistance. It's what most people grew up with, by the way.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that theory and what's behind that theory, I certainly didn't understand it at the time, but now I do because I've spent the last 20 years understanding motivation
Yeah.
and what
Okay.
is embedded in these different approaches to motivate behavioral change.
So you had to start with some awareness of kind of, you started learning this stuff, and some awareness of, oh, these are the kind of things that are going on, and then started looking for better ways to were you trying to get the results that you wanted, or just trying to find better results that made both parties happy? How did you approach that? How did you approach trying to do something different?
Yeah. I mean, I think really at the time I was operating from the personal experience and what I was carrying around from my own experience as having been parented with this approach. But I would say that, mom and dad were I wouldn't call them highly evolved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would say that there was no understanding, like, one of the terms that I think is more popular now is a trauma-informed approach, where you see the behaviors and there's more of a perspective that the behavior is a reflection of something. The behavior in and of itself isn't the issue. It's a
So the
symptom.
behavior from whoever it is, but in this context, right? So the behavior of your child, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, you can put it in a lot of contexts, but in this one, we'll just say behavior of the children. So when children are falling apart, they have certain falling apart behaviors. And people can label behaviors, good, bad, right, wrong. So in my mind, I'm remembering the dynamic between my father and my half brother, and it was not a very good relationship. And so dad would see those behaviors of Chris, which were, I now know, falling apart behaviors. It was somebody who was really hurting, and they became disciplinary issues.
Right. Right.
And it was like two ships passing in the night.
Yeah, sure. Well, because they're not,
There's no connection there.
there
There
was
was
no
no
connection.
understanding. My father saw these behaviors as, let's call it, disrespectful. And he would have to learn to behave. My dad even did it with my daughter when she was a little girl, and I had left them together. We'd come back from Hong Kong for the summer, and Dad, could you watch my daughter for me? I'm going to run out and do a few errands. Sure, honey, no problem. I come back and I'm like, well, where is she? Oh, she's in her room. I had to discipline her. I said, well, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Well, she disrespected me. I said, really? Like, what happened? Right? I mean, like, what he called disrespectful was that she just didn't respond as quickly as he thought was required.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And she was lost in coloring and didn't even hear him.
Right. Sure. Very old school, though, right? Yeah.
Very old school, but
so
very common.
When you say falling apart behaviors, I think that's the term you use. What does that mean exactly?
So falling apart behaviors could be not responding in ways that you think are the wrong tone, kicking a sibling, knocking somebody's papers over, slamming the door, I hate you. All kinds of behaviors that we will have issue with.
Well,
And
behaviors, right, that in some ways really truly aren't acceptable.
nope, they're
But
not.
then, yeah, but then it becomes a question of how do you resolve that in a way that's healthy and positive? Yeah.
Most people don't look past the I hate you, the slam door, the kick. That becomes the issue. And a behavioralist focuses on that.
Okay.
That's not okay with me. Go to your room. That's not okay with me. We're going to take away gaming, privileges, playtimes. Anything that you find pleasurable is now a punishment for how you present it.
Right. And then that
So
just
the presenting problem.
provokes another oftentimes inappropriate response, whether it's now or it's
Precisely.
delayed later.
Absolutely. It's called
Yeah.
a resentment flow. And
Sure. Okay.
the 3 R's: retaliation, rebellion, and resistance. So the 3 R's are the thing that we're really trying not to provoke. And we provoke them because of the way that this person is presenting. And we're like, well, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's not okay. However, it's also not really the issue. It's the symptom. It's a symptom of another problem. Now, it could be, we can make up all kinds of scenarios. It could be about you walked into the room and one child is crying and, looking at their brother or sister and saying, they stole my toy. We can take this all the way up depending on the age group. And you don't know what's going on, but you see one who's in distress and you look at the other one and you're like, well, that's not okay. Now give that toy back and don't grab things. But we haven't taken the time to understand like the whole story. And what we didn't understand is, yeah, they did grab the toy, but that's because you had said that they could play with it. And you had said, yeah, just 1 minute, 1 minute. And it's been half an hour. And,
Sure.
It was like, well, how long do you want me to wait? I mean, this has been beyond reasonable. There's usually a story. We only catch a glimpse of it when we decide that the problem is that somebody's right and somebody else is wrong.
Right. Right.
It's a mindset.
So then what's a better way to approach something like that?
Yeah, you walk in the room, you see it, you can see one person's in tears and the other person is upset, and you're like, I don't know what happened here. And it seems like there's been a real breakdown in communication, obviously, between the two of you as well. I can see you're really upset, and you're saying that to the one who's in tears, and you're looking at the other one who's like defiant and saying, it looks like you think you did the right thing in the circumstances, and I don't know what to do, but I'm happy to listen to both sides. And you come in and a lot of parents make this mistake, right? They come in assigning blame. And then they often take over the problem.
Right.
And so the key is not to take over other people's problems. This is not my problem. This is the problem. You two have a problem. And I'm sorry to see you're having a problem, and I'm here as a resource. And I'd love to be able to support you guys in reconciling this in a way in which both of you feels heard and understood from each other's perspective. So if I can facilitate you understanding you understanding you, then I feel like we might be able to get to an aha moment.
Right.
And the more often we can get to that aha moment, it's more likely that they've learned a skill.
Right. And that's the goal then, right? You're trying
It really
to help.
is.
Yeah.
It really is. The more that we can pass on these skills in every single one of these situations, the less likely they are going to be in that situation again. Because they'll be able to stop themselves. And I could hear it. My son used to say things like, because he had a little sister who was pretty annoying toward him. And of course, there's like a 4.5-year age gap. So developmentally, they're in completely different places. And so he would say things like, I think this is heading in the wrong direction. Maybe we should stop this, right? And so that was amazing to me that he would be able to preempt that.
Yeah. And that was just from you in other circumstances before that, helping them try to sort out. And so instead of taking over the problem for them, trying to help them work out a solution to whatever conflicts they might have been having in the past, right? Then that's a direct example of what you're saying, him learning a skill. That's what it sounds like to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many different things that we can do to support them at having something else in their toolbox other than just, the impulse. Right? So, I mean, impulse is already in the mix simply because it has to do with kids.
Well, what's interesting to me, Catherine, is also impulse is there for the parent, right? It's like, I think that's
Absolutely.
why you come in and you want to take over the problem. There's this conflict. You've got other things going on. You don't want to listen to this again. And right. So you have your own impulse to solve this. And then that's easy to be like, okay, right? You make a quick determination. This person's more to blame than the other, or I can't tell the difference. And so you're both going to your room or whatever it is. And then you're not then the lessons they're learning are not maybe the most helpful in the long run, right? They're not
That's
actually
true.
learning how to do this themselves. Today's episode is sponsored by Venture Valley, a Singleton Foundation program. Venture Valley is an esports style video game. It's multiplayer and it's based around business creation, so it's fun to play and compete, and you learn business and financial basics while you play. You can find Venture Valley at venturevalleygame.com. It's totally free. And thanks to Venture Valley and the Singleton Foundation for sponsoring this episode.
And there's something else that happens. In this conversation, I recalled a client of mine who, when they came into my training program, there was a really, really significant breakdown with their son, who was at that stage, I think he was probably like 17 going on 18 because he was a senior in high school. There was really like no communication highway anymore. There wasn't a lot of spontaneously just, sitting down and sharing each other's lives, like just wanting to include each other in each other's worlds.
Right.
That had disappeared. And after like literally like peeling the onion back over time, I think it was about one child who was more verbal. He was less verbal. His side was never really truly unpacked in a lot of situations. And there was a huge like feeling of not being seen, heard, and understood from his perspective over a long period of time. And I think that damages relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And being able to take that time is always, what is time? It's everything, right? What is love? Love is time. What we give our time to, people know, is what we value. So when we take the most important commodity in our life and we sit down and spare some of it to support a healing and reconciliation, which is what I would call these. This is really healing and reconciliation every time there's a breakdown and the other side doesn't see the other side's perspective. Every time we take a few minutes to support that happening, it's like currency in the bank.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
And it
I like
carries
that analogy.
dividends.
Yeah, sure. Good.
It carries huge dividends.
Yeah.
And it carries forward.
Well, because all of us want to be heard and understood, right? Seen, right? And especially kids. And if you've got kids that are more introverted or less verbal, then it's easy to not recognize how hurtful that can be that they're having those feelings. And that's not intentional, but that doesn't matter to that kid that's feeling that way.
Yeah, it's so true. I think you said it really well. And I think it seems like maybe minor, but it's actually not.
I don't think so either. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't think it's minor at all.
It's such a big deal. And it's the one little tiny correction that it's like that one domino. You make that one little tiny correction to take the time to see, hear, and understood each other's perspectives. It changes everything. I had a client once for a long time. She was Spanish, married to a German, and they lived all over the world. And she'd taken my training, and she had 3 kids, and there was a triangle in those relationships. So the oldest daughter often felt like she was excluded, or the youngest daughter would feel like she was excluded, or sometimes the middle boy would feel like he was excluded. And again, the tragic expression of the unmet need is that the one feeling excluded is the one that's most acting out.
Sure.
And it's easy to make them wrong.
Yeah.
And make them the one who's at fault. And that is often what would happen in this dynamic, this triangle. And so I would sometimes meet with all 3 kids, and they could actually understand the triangle, and they would say, oh, it's easy for, this one and this one. It's easy for us to have a relationship, which is the oldest in the middle. But when we're good, it's hard to include the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
And the little one and the middle one were really solid, but only at the exception of excluding her.
Yeah, sure.
So just them understanding the triangle was really interesting because the little one, who was really only like 5 or 6 at the time,
Wow.
she would actually get really excited and she would like draw triangles and, she could do that. She could draw the triangle and she could conceptualize that. She understood like how she would feel when she didn't feel like they included her.
Right.
And what that would do is she would then start being like the annoying little sister.
Right.
Right. And she would break in on them and she would do things and she would do all these ways to try to get their attention that were almost guaranteed not to work.
Sure. Because they're annoying.
And that's
right?
the other thing, right? Yeah. Is that when people are hurt, they have all these strategies that are almost guaranteed not to work.
Yeah, right. So it's a downward spiraling cycle.
Yeah. But just explaining it like that, I am always amazed at how our little children will be able to grok things and implement.
Yeah.
And she would even say things like, well, I made a mistake. She was taking accountability. She was happy to say I made a mistake because often it was barging in on her brother. And she didn't understand that he had needs for autonomy. He had needs for choice. He had needs to be asked when he was going to be, involved in a we thing rather than an I thing.
Yeah, sure.
So everybody understanding just the basics around consideration, autonomy, what does a closed door mean? It's not a rejection of you. It's a vote for me and my need to replenish myself, do a Lego, read a book, just color on my own, whatever it is.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, and especially right as kids, and if they're at different ages like that, and as they're aging, and if he's becoming a teenager, for example, right, then he's going through things where he's trying to figure out and manage and assert more independence, right? So that's going to be totally different than a younger sibling that's 4 or 5 years younger who just hasn't gotten there yet, right? I mean, those things really matter.
Absolutely. And I'm just kind of chuckling as I remember this particular situation because when the mom called up, and she was livid with the middle boy because he was so mean to his little sister. So that's how she had it, was that the middle boy was so mean to his little sister. So I had a nice rapport with all of them, and I could talk to the little sister, and then I could talk to the little boy. I mean, he was only, I think she was 6, he was maybe 8, 9, 10. I mean, there was not a huge, difference in age. And then the older one. And immediately it was clear to me that he and his needs for autonomy, consideration, boundaries around his space, they were trampled over by his little sister.
Sure.
And mom was mad at his reaction to his needs being trampled over. But she didn't see that the little one was doing that.
Right.
All she saw was that he was acting out when it happened and that he shouldn't yell at her.
Right. So then how did you help them resolve that situation?
Yeah. So I was able to just say, okay, now I totally get your side. So it sounds to me like saying to the middle boy, it sounds to me like what you really would have appreciated was a knock at the door. It sounds to me like what would have really supported you was being able to feel like you could say yes or no. And that it didn't feel like a request. It felt like a demand. You're going to play with me. You're going to play with me now, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And how come my mom can't see that?
Yeah, right.
Because now I feel like my mom loves her more than me, always favors her more than me, never takes the time to understand me, only understands her. So it was creating problems between mom and son because mom was always choosing to favor and support the little one who was meeting her needs by just taking whatever she wanted. She was out there. She was having no trouble violating everybody's boundaries to get her needs met. And that's when actually we did have the conversation about what it was like for her brother. And she was able to say, oh, well, I made a mistake.
Yeah. Okay. So then
it's amazing.
So what kind of recommendations did you make for the mother then so that she was better able going forward to see these things herself?
She is obviously, a really committed mom. So I would get a call from her, and, when these situations happened, and of course they happen all the time. And just because you clean up one and you get a, smooth sailing for, like, say, 6 weeks to a month or two, it doesn't mean that we're not just one corner away from a calamity, and we get to learn it all over again. And so I remember getting a call from her saying that actually, in this case, I'm remembering it was also around the son, and that he was being, in this case, really deplorable to his older sister. And again, it was a situation where it appeared like that was the case, but that's because nobody took a pause to wonder what was going on in him. They were going on a family vacation, and he was really kicking up because she wanted to bring a friend, and he's like, then I'm not going. And mom's like, oh my God, what a spoiled brat. Here we are going on this great vacation. Sister wants to bring somebody. He's welcome to bring somebody. Everybody's welcome to bring a friend. And he's not going because, he just wants to, like, kick up this big thing about, I don't like her and therefore she can't come. Nobody got curious about, like, that's really interesting. I wonder what the dynamic is between that boy and that friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so that just went completely unexplored. And it turns out, that friend was bullying that boy at school. And the minute everybody understood that, the whole thing changed. Now, of course, mom is like, oh my God, I had no idea. Why didn't you tell me that she was making fun of you? And the older sister, everybody then became protective of the boy.
Sure.
The whole story changed. Everything changed.
So then what I take from that is that, right, for that mother, what I'm taking is then to, when there's a problem, to step back and investigate and have conversation and try to figure out what else might be going on beneath the surface. And with some kids, that might take some time, because not every kid is able to tell you right away, right? If you've got someone that's less verbal, or they just need more time to process, you might have to ask them, well, yeah, and they might just be like, I don't know. And they need time to sort of think about, well, why am I being whatever way? I mean, in this case, he probably knew, but sometimes, right, they don't, and they might need time. But what I'm hearing is, well, then just don't be in a rush to solve things, but investigate and talk to them. Yeah.
I mean, here's what I know is that it's really hard to be around the drowning behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when people drown, they don't drown politely. They do it in ways that are socially unacceptable. And we can very, very, very easily make the drowning behavior the problem.
Yeah, right. Well, but then that just leaves this deeper issue that this kid is trying to resolve and doesn't know how to resolve. Then it leaves that still unresolved and adds a layer of frustration on top of that, rather than helping them. Because some of what I think parents need to do is just help kids identify what's actually stressing them out. But you can't identify that if you don't talk to them and try to tease out and help them. Because as an adult, you've had a lot of experience and time to sort of codify things and understand different behaviors or reactions to different things, and understand, oh, I'm feeling this way because, I'm really tired and I'm irritable all the time, or whatever other things it might be, or that kind of behavior from that person. I find that really irritating. So I've got to watch what I'm doing. But you've had time to develop that. As kids, they don't have the recognition. And so one of the things as a parent is to help them see, so then they can, and then help them figure out, well, what might be better ways to respond to those kind of things. But if you don't take the time as the parent to understand where they're coming from or help them tease it out, then that's where it becomes this struggle that you're talking about.
I think you did a great recap. That's exactly how I see it too. Yeah. Is that we do everybody a disservice when we don't take the time. And I understand we're all under pressure, and time is the most difficult thing to carve out. And it really is taking the breath, seeing the resistance differently, and just, really slipping as quickly into wonder. I wonder what's going on here. I wonder what's going on. And what helps us is to keep out of the negative view of children. if we can stay out of the negative view, right? Where,
Yeah.
he's being a brat, or he's
Yeah.
being so, irresponsible, or he's being so inconsiderate, or she is being this way. I mean, it goes both ways. And again, this same mom, because I worked with her for so many years, she would call up about the eldest daughter and say, she is awful and none of us can stand to be around her. And I would say, okay, let's hop on a call. And at some point, maybe you'll have enough empathy for your experience of what it's like to be around somebody who's drowning, that we can recognize that this person has to be drowning to be presenting like this.
Yeah. Right. Right. Well, it's kind of, it's funny, but ultimately what it reminds me of is when you're trying to sort things out, or you're trying to understand behaviors. And I think, I think every parent can understand, you have your own reaction and you have to manage that, right? Because when there's a strong sort of negative behavior, of course you want to react to that. And you bring up a really good point a couple minutes ago about, yes, we do have time pressures. And so sometimes you just want to resolve this problem now because you're busy and you've got your own stressors going on. But then it's back to, something you said early on, which is, well, but where you're choosing to spend your time, right, that shows sort of what you really care about, right, what you love in this case. And so maybe some of these other stressors, as a parent, it's best to have the discipline to say, you know what, I need to understand where this kid is coming from, because obviously they're upset, and that's more important than these other things. They'll still get sorted out. And that's hard to do, but I think so important. But ultimately, right, what I'm hearing is it's kind of like that, that now famous scene from Ted Lasso, which is be curious, right?
It was a great example of everything we're talking about. I mean, he used what and the co-creators who wrote this with me, what we call a guidance approach.
Mm-hmm.
He lived that. He was always in that mindset. He saw all of those players and their tragic expressions of their unmet needs. He saw it through, you could call it that trauma-informed perspective.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He could see the players, he could see their family of origin, he could see the dysfunction, he could see how it was helping or hurting. Yeah. Right? So
well, and not judging the behavior, but trying to understand where it was coming from and help them work out their own solutions.
And that's a really good example. And I agree with you. And, there's a catchphrase, name it to tame it. And so learning the words to name what I'm experiencing inside, frustration, worry, grief, right? Anxiety, hurt, sadness, naming what it is that I'm feeling internally actually diffuses it. So name it to tame it, which means I do need to have a vocabulary. Mm-hmm. And the more specifically like a laser, I'm able to get the verbal that matches the interior, it literally just dissipates.
Well, and I think that's so important, because that goes back to my example of sometimes you have kids where they may have strong feelings, but they're not understanding what those are. And as a parent, you've got to help them start to identify those things, right? So, and I've not heard that before, but I think that's great. Name it to tame it. I think that's
name it to tame it.
Yeah.
And the next step with name it to tame it is, so you support your kids, and the more you're able to acknowledge and connect with them where they are, the bigger and the deeper the breath. And once they're diffused, you can go into problem solving.
Right. Well, again, then you're teaching them, right, that skill, to identify, but then also, now you can have a conversation about, okay, how do you deal with these things? Because that idea of, oh, you're pressed for time, like, well, you're dealing with that for many, many, many years going forward. So the sooner you can start to recognize that and learn how to manage that, is only going to benefit that
Absolutely.
kid.
Absolutely.
So I want to go back and just, you talked about the 17-year-old son where there was a lot of conflict, and I don't want to leave that unresolved. So tell us how that played out. How did they work that out?
It's still playing out. So there was a divorce. I mean, it was messy. And so, from a very young age, maybe 7, there was back and forth between 2 different family households, all the stuff. And one kid who I just think a lot of the narrative was, he's the Clint Eastwood type.
Mm-hmm.
And so people will tell themselves a story to explain a situation. He's just the Clint Eastwood type, meaning, he just doesn't speak much. And I think what it really was not that he didn't speak much, but that he just never felt, seen, heard, and understood from his perspective. So why bother? So there were so many years of healing that was required to rebuild trust that it wasn't really 90 days with less complicated situations, there's almost nothing that we can't completely change and turn the tide. So if there's a situation where you've got that built up resentment flow, it can almost always be reversed and be on a new course way down the road. It's a lot harder when it's 17 years of buildup.
Sure. Yeah.
And in that case, it really is incremental changes of showing up differently, where your main concern is connection, where I think up until then, the main concern was discipline and correction.
Sure. Sure. Well, that's actually a really good way to think about it right there, which is, your main concern as a parent should be connection rather than discipline and correction. Because if you're focused on connection, then you can still get to the learning and the new skills and the corrections of negative behaviors. You're just doing it in a much more healthy, productive way that then is helping that kid, as they become an adult and go forward, versus provoking, rebellion or retaliation, or what were the 3 R's? Yeah.
Retaliation, rebellion, and resistance.
Yeah. No, that's great. So we're starting to get low on time. Any examples from your work with people over the years in terms of conflict with their kids around money and finances?
It comes up all the time, where everybody's trying to figure out, what is sort of the playbook here? Do we make them earn money? Right? So, I guess the theory of change or the theory of mind would be that children aren't entitled to any money unless they earn it. That's one idea. The other idea is, well, they're naturally dependent on us. So we're going to have, we're just going to give them a little something so that they can have their own little change in their pockets. I think that it's a skill. I think kids learning how to manage money is a skill.
Absolutely.
And I think the best way to do that is to give them some to manage and to work with them around building it, having conversations around it, understanding it as currency, realizing that, you can use it in a lot of different ways and you can use it for pleasure. Just really, it opens the door to conversation. We want our kids helping out around the house because we all have to pitch in.
Yeah, right.
So it's one of those ecosystem things that is really crucial to keep that spirit of contribution as the driver. Acknowledgement is giving children information about themselves, how they've supported you, what that activity did, and how you experienced it within yourself. So, thank you for setting the table. I really appreciate it. Just acknowledging how you appreciated this act of kindness.
Yeah. Well, and now they're feeling seen and heard, and you're fostering connection, right?
Absolutely. Appreciation is a great elixir. Appreciation and the absence thereof, rather than feeling like they're spoiled and they didn't do something, seeing it through the light of, I wonder if they're experiencing some tiredness today. I wonder if they're worn out, and giving someone a little grace and saying, hey, I noticed that, you're just looking a little tuckered today. And they can say something like, I feel so exhausted. My tank is just empty. And you being able to say, well, I really appreciate you letting me know. And I hope you can fill it up and just find some, exciting, fun things to do, whether it's read a book, color, or whatever you need to do. I trust that, when you need to fill yourself up, you'll take the time to do it.
I think that's good. I think, lots of useful thoughts and advice, and just the idea of making a point to, as a parent, to step back, slow yourself down, not try to solve the problem, but to help them sort it out on their own. And ultimately, right, what's behind all that is a focus on, an emphasis on connection and understanding.
Yeah.
Because I think, that's because the techniques for dealing with any sort of financial conflicts that may come up, whether that's between siblings or when you're trying to teach them something about money and they don't want to do things a certain way, being able to have those conversations, it's no different than any of the other things that we've been talking about, right? I mean, it's going to be the same underlying principles of trying to understand and connect and then have a meaningful, open dialogue about that. And that doesn't mean maybe it takes a little bit longer to get resolved and you've got to allow them time to process. But then if your goal is connection and helping them learn and grow, then that's where, as a parent, sometimes you've got to have the discipline to be patient, which can be hard, but it's important.
Totally agree. Yeah, great recap.
So where can people find you, Catherine, if they want to get in touch with you or want to learn more?
Yeah. So consciousparentingrevolution.com, that's my website. And I have a Amazon bestseller called 7 Strategies to Keep Your Relationship with Your Kids from Hitting the Boiling Point. And I direct you to freeparentingbook.com where you can go and download that. And that just puts it straight in your hands. And there's some really strong strategies there for dealing with a whole range of conflicts. Some we've talked about today and some others that we didn't have time for. So those are probably the 2 easiest, is to just go to the website. You'll get a pop-up if you want to sign up for my newsletter. And then there's all kinds of, like you mentioned earlier, free resources. There's all kinds of support around just understanding the 3 R's, retaliation, rebellion, right, and resistance, and understanding these resentment flows and how they develop.
Yeah, right. I'll put those links in the show notes.
Great.
And thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I really
enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, me too. And thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I appreciate what you do.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the FI for Kids podcast. Please support the show by hitting subscribe and receive new episodes every Thursday. The intro and exit music this episode are courtesy of Douglas Cameron. As always, you can find links to the FI for Kids music in the show notes. Thanks again, and we'll talk next week.
You're like the horizon. I can't reach you, you're so far away. And if I run to the place I want you to stay, you'd be gone. I'd be left wondering why you moved on, and why you never said goodbye. I can't wait any longer. I see the writing on the wall. It's time for us to say, tomorrow we are yesterday. Tomorrow we are yesterday. You're like the sunset. You're glowing bright, but you're fading. And what I don't get is why I'm left here waiting. But I'm like a phoenix. I will rise up from this fire. It's something we can't fix. I guess it's time for us to retire. I can't